Hello. Welcome to another edition of Shining Light on Shadows, a candid conversation about mental health. We have another special episode. It feels like a lot of these episodes are special, but our guest is a familiar face. Dawn Helmrich Neuburg is our guest. We're going to be talking about her work accessing repressed memories and her, challenge with not having childhood memories. But we're focusing on her use of EMDR as a therapy. My name is Neil Parekh. I am the host today, not just the co-host. I'm always the producer, but I'm the host today. This is a follow-up to our last episode with Tim Fielder. Tim Fielder was our guest on our previous episode 23, where he talked about his experience with EMDR as an option for processing trauma. Dawn wasn't actually there for that episode. She was there in spirit. She was actually on a trip to Hawaii at the time, so we missed her. And then she's coming back this week as our guest. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and my website. We're live on both mine and Dawn's Facebook pages and on both of our Instagram accounts. We do hope that you will do all the things you do on social media to like, comment, share, retweet, so that folks will find the show and access it. Of course, you can always watch it later on demand. And for anyone coming back and watching it later, thank you for taking the time to do that. We are always appreciative of the support that we get from Digimentors which produces the show. Digimentors is a consulting firm that was started by my colleague Sri Srinivasan, who started this firm several years ago. I'm the vice president of events and communications at Digimentors, and it means a lot that they give me the time and space to produce the show and share with you twice a month. Digimentors does digital marketing, events and digital programs, strategic communications, training, and workshops. We also do a lot of work with AI. So thank you very much to my colleagues at Digimentors for your support. If you're watching the show on Facebook, just always a good reminder, make sure you press play on the video so that if you leave a comment, we'll see the comment on the actual video. Sometimes when you're watching, when it comes across your feed, you might just actually comment on the post, or if someone shares it, you might comment on the post, and we won't be able to see that comment. So hopefully that will help. Of course, if you're watching on Twitter, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, other platforms, we should be able to share your comments and put them on screen. We have a few folks who are watching on Facebook. Jonathan is watching from the East Village. Jonathan, thank you for joining us. Our friend Kate, a former guest on the show and close friend of Dawn's and mine. I'd like to call you a close friend, Kate, if that's okay. Says so much love and support from downstairs. She's downstairs because she's actually Dawn's landlady. Dawn lives upstairs from her. We also have Becky Lucas joining us. Becky Lucas offers love and support from Destin. So we will check in with Becky when Dawn comes on. And my mom is watching from Tampa. So Mom, thank you for watching and appreciate all the support you offer for this and the other work that I do. Jim Newberg is watching as well. Peace, love, and salutations from the other side of the wall. Are you this side? No, he's the other side of Dawn's wall. So Dawn's not here yet, but we will put her on. If you're wondering, again, the reason we're opening the show this way is that I'm the host today and Dawn is our guest. So we're trying to give her the guest treatment and have her come on at the appropriate time. And before we do that, I do want to give a little bit of background. We talked about EMDR last time, and I want to make sure that folks know in terms of EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing. and reprocessing, right? It's a therapy, it's a form of psychotherapy that insurance does cover. We talked about this on our last episode with Tim Fielder. It's something that helps people either reprocess trauma, or in Dawn's case, hopefully helped a little bit to access some childhood memories that she has not been able to access. So what we want to do real quick is play a little explainer video first to give you a sense of what EMDR is, and then we'll bring Dawn on to talk about her experience and this great blog post that she wrote. Here's a little bit of background on EMDR.
EMDR stands for Eye Movement Desensitization and Reprocessing. It's a type of therapy that a therapist is trained in and can help people heal from traumatic life experiences. It's pretty interesting because it uses eye movements or other ways to get both sides of your brain working together. Sometimes when something bad happens, our brains can't always process it right. The brain can get stuck in a loop, going back over the event, trying to make sense of it. That can make us feel stuck dealing with upsetting thoughts and feelings and cause us to have nightmares and flashbacks. EMDR kickstarts the healing process by changing the way negative memories are stored in the brain. During EMDR, you think about the tough stuff while doing side-to-side eye movements or hand tapping. It's like these movements help your brain move past the trauma and file away the memories in a way that doesn't hurt so much anymore. The goal of EMDR is to help your brain realize that you're no longer in danger and that you're not to blame for whatever bad event you went through. EMDR has been used a lot for people who have gone through really scary or dangerous things. It can also help people of all ages with mental health issues like PTSD, anxiety, depression, eating disorders, gender dysphoria, OCD, and panic disorders. EMDR involves 8 phases and tends to work faster than other forms of therapy. It does not involve medication, but a mental health professional may recommend medication along with the therapy. It can also be less stressful for some people than other therapies because you hold the memory in your mind rather than talking about it in detail. Learn more about EMDR by visiting adaa.org. They have free resources and a Find Your Therapist tool to help you find support nearby.
And that is a little bit of background on EMDR. I want to share this blog post that Dawn wrote. Cherish your memories. Losing them to trauma is devastating. And the pull quotes, I couldn't remember large portions of my childhood from before I got raped. Bits and pieces of information from my childhood would come back to me every session I attended. With that, I want to bring on our guest, not our co-host, but our guest for this evening, Dawn Helmrich Neuburg. Dawn?
Hello.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me in this kind of different way.
Of course, you would have joined us anyway. But in all seriousness, when we were planning our episodes and talking about what we were going to do, and we had Tim Fielder joining us our last episode to talk about his experience with the EMDR. I'll just share that as we were planning it, I'm thinking, well, okay, Dawn is not going to be available this Thursday. She's traveling. Tim is a friend of mine. It's easier for me to schedule in a friend when Dawn's not there, and I'll just handle the show. That's all good. And he said he's going to talk about EMDR. I didn't know that you had such a profound connection and experience with the EMDR. You actually wrote your blog post before the last episode. And so for folks, just so folks know, what Dawn said was, hey, Neil, if you want to share this blog post during the episode, feel free to talk about it. And I read it and I was just on the floor. Like there was no way that I was going to try and talk about this blog post. It was so moving. It was so powerful. We had to do a part 2 on EMDR and wait till Dawn got back so that we could focus on it. We've talked about her experience being raped before at a little bit 31 years ago now, I think it is, if I'm not mistaken, violently attacked. She wrote a memoir about it. I read that over the holidays, and it was very moving. I actually found the blog post more heartbreaking than what I read in the memoir. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But with that set up, Dawn, let's start talking about this. This is the first time you're sharing this story about your childhood memories and not being able to access it, right?
Yeah, publicly for sure. I've shared little bits and pieces with friends, and but I've never really talked about some of the repressed memories that I from my childhood that I wanted to tap into. Nor have I talked about really deep gaps in my memories from before I was raped. So it's a little scary actually. I think it's like one of those intimate pieces that I just haven't ever shared because it's really difficult to talk about not being able to remember things.
So that like this actually happens when you like you meet friends from high school and they talk about, you remember that time in ninth grade when we all went out? Like
Yeah.
that doesn't resonate with you, or you can't bring anything up with that?
Yeah, it's I met up with an old high school friend a couple of years ago, and she got so frustrated with me because she kept saying, "Don't you remember that party we went to? And like this happened and this happened and this happened." And I was like, blank, deer in headlights, no recollection. She tried to give me all kinds of prompts. We were at this location, we were talking about this. I had nothing, absolutely nothing. And it's that happens a lot for me. My dad and my brother will get together and we'll all be in a room together and they'll be talking about, "Oh, do you remember this time we went up to Lake Superior and we were on this boat and we were doing this?" And like blank, just completely blank. No memory. And in my blog post I talk about how it's almost like the person that I was before I got raped, like, died or left, and everything about that person is now suddenly gone, and and it's really it's, like, scary, it's a sad, scary feeling.
Now this is different than, I mean, I and Pam, my wife, will often kind of tease me about this. My memory is pretty bad, right? Like I don't remember things from last week. And, I talking with close friends of mine from high school. I'm thinking in particular, John Bernstein, who has watched some of these episodes, a friend of mine, Jeff Marcus, who shares on Twitter. We'll talk about things, and I may or may not remember details, or kind of can't pin down something, but that's not what you're talking about. You're not talking about, we're both about the same age, 50 plus or something. Not, I'm not going to talk about a woman's age on live TV unless she says the number, but that's not what you're talking about. You're not talking about like general kind of, like you just can't pin down. You're talking about blanks. You're talking about like nothing, right?
Yeah, so my husband, who is on the other side of the wall, will tell you I have a memory like a steel trap. I can remember very fine details of many things that are in current times. I can remember probably I have lapse in memory from when I got raped at 21, probably till 25 or 26. Um, and then like my new life began where I got married and had children. And like I remember a lot of those things. But it is like it's like a blank page. Like those things never really happened to me in my life pre
Wow.
being raped. So yeah, it's pretty significant.
Wow. I want to give a quick hello to Paula Kiger, who's watching from DC, a colleague of mine at Digimentors, which I mentioned earlier. Arun is watching from Canada, making reference to a potential 51st state, but he's a student of Sri's, Sri Srinivasan, the person who founded Digimentors. Digimentors provides pro bono support for producing this show, so you'll hear them mentioned more than once. My aunt is watching from Canada, from what Arun was referring to as the potential 51st. Thank you, and I'm going to refer to her as Neela Masi. Masi is in Gujarati the term you use for mother's sister, so she's my aunt. But Neela Masi, thank you so much for watching. She's done so several times. And Rose Horowitz, another Digimentors colleague, is watching from Connecticut. So thank you, Rose. So you have these gaps in your memory. You have this kind of almost like Swiss cheese type experience. And you've gone through therapy. We've talked about therapy before on this show, mostly talk therapy. But you also explored this modality called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. How did that become a referral? I know Tim talked about on the show last week, which I think you got a chance to watch some of, either when you were on vacation or when you got back. But he talked about how he did talk therapy and took it about as far as he could, that he was encouraged to try journaling. And then, in talking with someone else, a few other conversations, someone suggested the idea of EMDR. How did you come to try EMDR?
So I didn't have any repressed memories around what happened to me when I was 21. I could talk about that pretty openly and easily. But I had this really big nagging thing that every time I did talk therapy, my childhood, like early childhood, would come up in the conversation, but I wouldn't know why. Like, I just knew that when I thought about a certain time in my life when I was younger, before this all happened, that I had just some very icky feelings, but they were just feelings. There was no, like, I didn't see anything. I didn't have any flashbacks about anything. All I knew was that when I thought of myself when I was 5 or 6 or 7, that I felt repulsed by that notion, that time in my life. And it was very frustrating, incredibly frustrating, because I wanted to know, like, why do I have those feelings? And why can't I tap into those? Why can't I remember anything from that point in time in my life? And my therapist was trained in this modality, and asked me if I was interested in giving it a shot. And at that point, I just wanted to remember something. Like, I just wanted to remember something. Like, even if it, brought up something like really bad or evil, I just wanted to remember what it was that was stuck, that I couldn't think about or get images of in my head.
Now, was this an issue before? So you talked about how you had full access to your memories of being raped, which is something that, for other people, that kind of incident, certainly you'd understand why your brain would wall that off and try and protect you from that. But you had full access to that. Before your rape, did you actually, like, was this something that came up? So let's say when you were 18 or 19, did you not have access to those earlier childhood memories, or did you not? Did that come up as an issue for you?
So this is the tricky part. I don't remember.
Yep. Sorry, you don't
No,
remember.
it's totally
What was
fine.
prom like, Dawn? No, obviously you can't.
No, I
Yeah.
seriously, I don't remember. I don't
Yeah.
know if I knew what was going on in my life at that time before this happened, because I can't tap into
Wow.
anything before that. So if I did know, only I knew, because no one else around me, I'd never said anything to anybody else around me because I asked. I said, my mom was alive at the time, and I'm like, hey, did I ever tell you anything that happened to me when I was like a small child, a kid? And she was like, no, I don't recall you saying anything. I asked my brother, I asked my best friends, like, I had, if I did know, I certainly wasn't sharing with anyone, which my therapist said was entirely possible, right? That
Hmm.
I could
Hmm.
have I could have had full recollection and just chose not to share that information about what might have happened to me in my childhood.
Wow. So we're talking about EMDR. We're making references to it. Let's take a moment and show people what we're talking about specifically. There are several ways, but there are two ways in particular that we're going to make reference to. The first is, and we saw from that video, that little animation, part of the EMDR is to get people kind of accessing both sides of their brain, to kind of change the way their brain actually functions, and to kind of do something while thinking about the memories. So I want to play this one video that shows one approach, and we'll just 30 seconds of this real quick. So this is showing a therapist. This is after giving instructions, etc. In an hour-long kind of simulated therapy session, she does this for about 40 seconds, just going back and forth. Now, this was part of your therapy, right? You actually sat in that chair and you had a therapist running their finger like that?
Yes. Yeah.
Tell us what that was like.
So typically the first thing that they is to pick a moment in time or some feeling or an age, some reference to what it is that you're trying to solicit in terms of a memory. And then they use that motion to kind of get you into this state where um, you can start to tap into what those memories might be. Um, and I've heard for some people that it's relatively easy. To me, it's kind of like hypnosis. Like some
Yeah,
people are like
it
really
looks like that.
easily, yeah, they're really susceptible to hypnosis. They can be hypnotized pretty easily. I've had people that I know who've stopped smoking because of that, who've done different things. For some people, it's really, really different. It's really, really difficult. And for me, it was really, really difficult. Um, I really had to work at chipping away just very little by very little at whatever this wall was that was there. And I see that Rose asked the question,
Yeah.
why did your therapist and other professionals say you couldn't remember? And I think there's no real answer to that. I think that it's a protective factor. Um, I think that for me, it was probably like a necessary evil, like the trauma that I had experienced after being raped, compiled with whatever this childhood memory was on top of it. My brain probably was like, that's too much to bear, that's too much to bear, we're going to just like put this away somewhere, and you can't access it. In terms of the good memories, which I know that I have had those, gosh, if somebody could tell me why I can't remember those good memories as well as the bad ones, like that'd be great. But I don't no one's ever been able to give me a good answer to that.
Sure. No, I mean, and that's something that is, just challenging to even think about. I mean, you can make assumptions about what that memory might be, but you're focusing in on something that happened when you were very young. You said you
Mhm.
felt uncomfortable around that time frame or thinking about that age. So there's something, you do have some kind of tether to that. You don't have the memory, but you have some kind of emotional,
Yep.
um not trigger, but some kind of tether to what happened then.
Yes,
Um,
a very uncomfortable feeling, like in the pit of my stomach, whenever I would think about that period of time in my life. And when I did talk therapy, what brought it up is my therapist said, "Tell me about your childhood." And I would be like, "Well, my parents were alcoholics, and um, I'd give like bits and pieces of information, and like I remember pieces of my dad being an alcoholic and having to pick him up off the floor and things of that nature." But when she said, "Okay, like let's go back a ways, like before you remember helping your dad get up off the ground or to bed, or you remember him like passing out in the kitchen." And as I would back up to those earlier memories, all of a sudden I'd be like, "I don't want to talk about that." And she'd be like, "Okay, explain more. Like, why don't you want to talk about that?" I don't know. I don't know why I don't want to talk about it, but I know that I don't want to talk about it. It makes me uncomfortable. It makes me shaky. It makes me shaky talking about it right now. I feel a little jittery, a little flushed. And I think, that's where we kind of got to the place where she asked if I wanted to explore that more or not.
so I'll share that when I was doing a little research on this topic, I actually reached out to a group called the EMDR Institute, and we have their website, some information about them. We'll share it again later in the program. But if folks are interested, you can reach them at emdr.com or email them. I found them very, I talked to the director and they were very helpful. Um, I think one of the things that we should mention and we should talk about is that this idea of accessing repressed memories is a little controversial. There's some questions around that, and I'll just share that from my perspective. When I talked to the director and I was explaining the show and kind of what we're doing, and you know she explained it to me a little bit in terms of how it's used for people with PTSD and who've gone through trauma. I told her, and this is something that we've shared on the show, so I'm kind of trying to ease into the conversation because Dawn and I sometimes we talk about our history, our experience of being of having been raped or sexually abused, and sometimes we forget that not everyone knows that background, is familiar with that. We do have new people who are watching every week, so if we didn't warn you about that, our apologies. But it's so much a part of our stories. I was abused, as folks who watch the show would know. I was sexually abused by a neighbor when I was 7 years old. And similar to what Dawn was saying, like I remember as much as I can from when I was 7, kind of what happened that in that moment, what the initial abuse was. But when I was talking to that person at the institute, I shared with her that one of the things that's challenging for me personally, and it's still challenging, and it's always a big issue for me to talk about, is that after that initial incident, there were several other incidents that took place the following year, over the summer, I think the summer after that. Um, and I don't have a clear understanding of what happened when and for how long. And those weren't, at the time, I didn't frame them as abuse. I thought that I was engaging in sexual activity with this neighbor that had abused me. I thought that I was in charge, that I had agency, that I was, willingly doing things, uh, with some help and some appropriate therapy over time. I realized that at 8, 9, and 10, when I'm with a 16-year-old, 15, 16, 17-year-old, like that's that's abuse. That's just not, there's no agency, there's no kind of intentionality there. But this person at the institute said that EMDR may help in that situation, uh, fill in some of the gaps that I have. Like, I don't know, I can't tell you um, how often we engaged in those activities. I can't tell you which years, or whether it was for weekly for 2 months, or just like twice over the summer, and then the next. Like, I don't know any of that. I just have, like you said, bits and pieces. Um,
And
so
Neil, I'll say that that is not uncommon at all. I'm just going to digress for a minute because
please,
I'm going to talk about the justice system,
sure,
because oftentimes the reason that people are not believed is because the story that they might have given at the time that they were doing the police report, making, the call, talking to the first responder, oftentimes within hours, that whole concept gets blurred. and
mm,
and especially when abuse happens over time as a young child. um you can't say on May 31st of 1977 at
yeah,
6 o'clock this
yeah,
particular thing happened to me. That's not how trauma works. And so a lot of times there's this stigma against someone who's been sexually abused or traumatized in that way, that they don't know the fine details of what happened, and they should. And the reality is that that is not how our brains comprehend trauma. It just doesn't happen that way. And I think a lot of people who've experienced sexual trauma will attest to that 100%.
And in my case, I mean, for good or for ill, there wasn't uh, any reporting. There wasn't any, kind of authority that I had to, relate the story to, and be questioned about, well, if you don't remember, it didn't like that. It's more for my own understanding, and kind of, kind of telling that story, figuring out what happened. But that's something that I thought was interesting. Like, I was on the phone, with this person who I'd never spoken to before, and sharing stuff that I barely share, even as much as we do these shows. And as much as I did this, 2 years before, a whole year's worth of shows with Candace Sanchez, um, you know, on male survivors of sexual abuse. I still had difficulty sharing that part of the story. So it's very to me, it's interesting, something that maybe worth pursuing at some point. um Getting back to your story and EMDR, we showed the hand movement, but there was also another kind of within EMDR, another approach in terms of and you wrote about it. It's not just the movement, but there's also a tapping sequence that helps, that plays a part in this. So let's check out this other approach real quick to give people a sense of what that looks like.
What I'm teaching you now is the butterfly hug. So what you're going to do is put your hands on your chest, and you're going to point your fingers vertically toward your neck, not out toward your arms. And then you're going to connect the butterfly's body, which is your 2 thumbs, and the butterfly wings are going to be your hands, and you're going to tap on the left and right side of your body to connect the left and right side of your brain. And just pay attention to the sights, sounds, thoughts, anything that happens, kind of like clouds passing you by. And this will help you to soothe yourself and help you to process the current situation.
And that's from Transformations, a treatment center. You did that actual butterfly technique, right? Where you hook your hands and you tap alternating.
I didn't hook my hands, but I did
No?
on
Like
either shoulder, like this. And that worked a lot better for me than any of the other. They had like this machine that you could like put your fingers on, and it sent this little tiny like electrical charge to first your right hand, then your left hand, then your right hand, then your left hand. I did not like that at all. So we did away with that and just really did the tapping, which was much more effective for me.
It's great that you found something. It's great that there's several different ways that you can access that. Rose is asking a question, follow up to the conversation around abuse. In recovering from abuse, do mental health professionals think it's important to remember details about time, etc.? You talked about how authorities put pressure on people to know the details, but in your experience, if you have a thought on this, how important is it really too? And I'll think about this as well, but what do you think about this?
So I don't think that it had anything to do in my situation with the mental health professional thinking that I needed to remember the details. It was what I did. So did I want to explore that feeling that I had from when I was 6, 7 years old more? Was it important for me to have a timeline or a framework around? It's really difficult when you can't remember stuff, to like not know, like, even I'll give a prime example. I have gotten the day that I was raped wrong on more than one occasion, where I've either posted something on Facebook the day before or the day after. And my best friend will be like, do you remember that you were actually raped on this day and not this day? And it's just it's a weird thing. I can't even explain why that comes about.
And was that a challenge in the legal process for you, in terms of playing, not getting the date?
Yeah, because what happens is if you talk about it in what you've scripted in your mind, right? Then you sound scripted. And then they don't believe you because it sounds like you're reading off of some type of script that somebody handed you. And if you talk about it like you're trying to remember it, then it comes across as you don't know what you're talking about and you're making it up. Very frustrating. Very frustrating. And
I can only imagine.
And you get challenged from, people about that, about what that looks like.
Thank you, Rose, for kind of putting that comment up there and kind of prompting that discussion. So you went through this process. You've gone through therapy. Now, just help us in terms of timing. When was it that you were going through EMDR? Was this a while ago, or?
Let's see. My kids are 24 and 22, and they were probably 9 and 10 at the time. So a good 10, 12 years ago.
10, 12
Yeah.
years ago, yeah.
Yeah, somewhere around that.
So you went through the process. It's supposed to help you, access some memories to kind of clear up some of those issues. Did it work?
It did not.
Did not.
It chipped away, and I would start to remember like doorways and different images and pictures of things. But it would stop. Like I'd get to one spot and it would stop. And it was literally a doorway. I would get to the doorway and I never entered into the doorway. I couldn't get past that point. And, at one point in time, my therapist said, maybe you just don't need to remember that. Maybe you just don't need to remember it. You are blocked and you're getting very frustrated. And we would try to like revert it to like a different memory in my life, like a good memory. Like, let's try to remember something around that time that was good, like a vacation or something else. And I just couldn't, in that span of time, I couldn't get there. I could go further on in like my childhood, like into like my elementary school time frame, like 5th, 6th, 7th grade. Yeah, I can remember being in plays and what that felt like. But I never was able to really break through in that area until much, much later. And that was not through therapy. That was just suddenly a breakthrough that I had where everything just kind of came back to me in one evening, just like that. And
your memories came back.
Just the memories around that particular incident when I was a kid.
Got it.
Just those.
Got it. And so then you didn't have to deal with this question of, grappling with this idea of not having those memories. Those memories did come back, not from EMDR, but they just happened. I don't know what, what about the other high school memories or other time periods?
Nope.
Is this something you struggle with still, or have you made some peace with it? Where are you today? 2025, 50 years old. How do you? I mean, this is the first time you're talking about this, and I want to emphasize that because, I feel like that's a very important part of what we're doing. We started this show last year. We're at episode 24 now. We started it last February with the idea of reducing the stigma around mental health. We've covered a range of different topics, but I think for me, and I don't want to speak for you, Dawn, as our co-host, not as our guest tonight, but as my usual co-host, we've had a number of people share their own stories for the first time publicly through this show. Going back to our last episode, Tim Fielder had never shared this publicly. Melissa Lutke, who is an author and journalist, shared her experience with clinical depression 30 years after it happened, and wrote a blog post about it on her very widely read Substack. The first time she's ever kind of talked about this. I shared my story publicly. Jim shared his. Kate shared hers. And now you're actually, even though you've talked a lot about your experience being raped and your experience with depression and anxiety, this is the first time you're talking about this really monumental idea that of drawing a blank when it comes to uh, childhood memories. Um, where are you with that now? It's been several years since you've tried this therapy, and uh, how are you feeling about that?
So, you know, this gets me really emotional because, it's a grieving thing. I mourn that. I wanna remember, I went to Milwaukee High School of the Arts, and I want to remember the people that I spent time with and the things that I did, and the friendships that I made, um and those like relationships with people. And I think we kind of forget about that when we do have memories, because memories is what connects you to people. um and I feel a huge loss um in my life for that. Like, my very, very best friend Dawn, um whom I love with all my heart and soul, you know she brings up like funny, quirky childhood things that we did, and you know yeah, crawling through windows and sneaking out. I don't remember any of that. I don't. She talks about specific sleepovers and conversations we had of growing up and boys and things like that, and I miss that. I miss that so much. It's definitely something that I think, rightfully so, people take for granted. But memories is what builds relationships and connects you to other people. And when you lose those, you kind of lose the sense of what those relationships were like. I still have the friendships, right? But they have a greater connection about what our relationships were like than I have with them. And it's just it's an odd thing. It's a really odd thing. And so you asked me how I am at 53, and yes, I'm saying my age at 53. um I think I still struggle with it, and it's embarrassing, even though I understand it's not my fault and that I've really tried to work on it. But when someone recognizes you and you don't recognize them, or when someone starts telling you stories of something that you did with them and you don't have any recollection, it's really easy to say, "Oh yeah, absolutely. That was really fun. I'm glad we did that." But that can throw you down a really big rabbit hole because you don't have any details. So, like, I've learned not to do that. I've learned to be very honest with people and say, "You know what? I honestly don't remember that situation." And sometimes people are hurt, like, "But that was one of the greatest moments we had in our friendship, and you don't remember that?" And I don't. I don't. And I have to be very forthright about that.
Does it force you to explain a little bit more than you might normally do in terms of, no, no, it's not that I have a bad memory. I actually have I don't know if it's a condition, but I have some kind of block. I've gone to therapy. I've tried EMDR. Like, I've done what I can. I just cannot. I mean, because I know that I don't remember, things from high school. There are certain things that I'm kind of hazy on, but it's not like this. I mean, this is something that is. I mean, it's almost. Well, like I said, I think it's more heartbreaking than what I read in your book, because I can relate to the idea, at least. I mean, I can empathize with you, and I can offer my support as a survivor, as someone who went through a traumatic incident. But it's something that I can't see myself in that same position of being attacked and, raped and left for dead and shot, literally shot in the head. I can't really wrap my mind around that. But this idea of not having my memories, of not being able to like really connect when people are talking about things that happened at graduation or prom, or when John Burston and I, for some reason, we walked from our hometown in Hastings to the Grand Union in Dobbs Ferry, the next town over, at like 2 a.m. just to buy salami and cheese. Like I don't really know why we did that, but we did that. I remember that. You know, that's what hit me when I read your, like, I just couldn't, I just could not
Yeah.
get past
And
that.
when you think about that memory, like I was watching your face saying that memory, right? It
Yeah.
gives you a good feeling. It makes you, it reminds you of a time when things were simpler, when
Yeah, totally.
you were a goofball, and not that you're not still a goofball, because you
I'm
are,
not a
but
goofball anymore.
but like it takes you to a place that that sometimes people like to escape to, and when you don't have that place to escape to, it's a very empty, lonely feeling.
Yeah,
And you asked me if I explain it to people. It depends upon who the person is that I'm talking to. um
sure.
it depends upon what my like mood is, how I'm feeling that day, whether I want to go into it or I don't. Most of the time I'll, smile and wave, like I can't get there, don't remember that particular piece, and often don't go in unless somebody's like really presses me. But it's funny because it's this weird feeling of being gaslighted, but but it's not people being gaslighting you, and they're not being mean, and they're not telling you something that didn't happen, but it feels like you don't remember it, so it feels like it didn't happen. And they're telling you more details and more details, and you're just like, my mind is being blown right now. Like, gosh, I can't get there. Like, I can't, it's blank, just completely blank.
I want to bring in Kate. Says the brain is so powerful, and it really, really is. It does. It's kind of powerful in good ways and bad ways, but it certainly exerts some kind of control over things that we don't understand, that we don't always have access to. But that's a very
Yeah.
telling comment. I want to bring in, there are a few other comments that have come in. Dr. Chitachi Egwu says, good evening to all. And want to make sure that folks know that we do have time for some other comments and questions, but also if you joined us late, I certainly encourage you to watch from the beginning. As soon as we're done, if you're watching on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on my website, on Twitter, wherever you're watching, just a few minutes after we're done, you'll be able to watch from the beginning. And I can always already think of a couple of clips that I want to pull out and share in particular that are really meaningful. But I certainly encourage you to watch some of the early parts of the show. I mentioned that we're live on Twitter as well. We can't, it's a reply, so I can't kind of show it on screen in the same way, but I just want to share that Juntai Delane, who is a colleague of ours, a friend of Sri's, and I've gotten to know him a little bit as well, just says, what an interesting conversation happening here, as a reply to the live tweet. And I think that it's certainly, that's an understatement, if nothing else. My mom, who's watching, says that it's a painful experiences are hidden in unconscious because it's very difficult to keep it active at the conscious level. It's difficult to deal with, and to talk about it is very difficult as well. And therapy can help, and therapy certainly does help and has helped both of us and others that we've spoken to. Jim is saying how much he's proud of you, which is not surprising, but I also think it's important to see that I know Jim. I've had a chance to meet him. I know how much he loves you. but it's also good for others to see that as well. And for an introvert to type that out so that others can see it, and for an extrovert to let an extrovert like me talk about him. Jim, thank you. I appreciate that. Takes a lot of courage to open up like this. Rose is quoting what your therapist said earlier about your memories. Maybe you just don't need to remember that. It's an interesting perspective, and that's possible. Maybe you don't need to. I mean, there are things that, life is hard enough. Like, maybe just leave that be, and we just kind of that is good. We have another comment from Crystal Ship that I want to bring in, or is it Crystal or the way it's
Crystal.
written, Crystal.
Yep.
So after almost 10 years, God finally gave me details. I honestly believe that God waited until I was mature enough emotionally and mentally to give me the details so that I could have closure and officially start my healing journey. And she has another part of the comment that I think the first part, actually, God blocked my memory for 10 years as a form of protection after being drugged, raped, and hospitalized for almost 9 years. I don't think I would have come out of it if I knew the details around what happened to me. Crystal is a friend of yours.
Yes.
Someone that you know.
Crystal, if you are still watching, my heart is with you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think, that's a really, really good point where people sometimes they don't understand why we need to remember, why we want to know the details of what happened to us. And her point about closure, I think, is so important, that sometimes it just stays in your brain, and it resonates. It comes up over and over and over again. And when you can't really make sense of it, not that her situation could be made sense of, right? In most situations, there is no sense to be made. But if you can't recall the details enough to be able to close the book on it, it can be really, really frustrating, really frustrating. So Crystal, I'm just so grateful that you shared that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Crystal. We have a few other comments. Deborah Kerr joined late as well. Deborah, totally fine. Appreciate you sharing that, but certainly encourage you, if you get a chance to watch earlier parts of the show, or even the clip that I plan on sharing, encourage you to do that. This is definitely one of several powerful episodes that we've had. I mentioned that after we're done, you'll be able to watch the show on the same links that you're watching from now. We do have several people watching on Instagram. It takes a little bit longer for us to get the Instagram clip up, but we will certainly get either the full video and or a shorter clip for folks to watch. Becky says, love you, Dawn. So proud of you for so many reasons. You are loved and supported by so many. Exactly.
Sometimes that's my sister-in-law. That's my
that's your sister-in-law. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I don't so find out, if Becky, if this is the first time you're getting a chance to watch, or maybe the first time you're commenting, thank you for taking the time. The support from family and extended family means so much. Is this your sister-in-law in Texas? Is it your
No, it's Jim's
other
sister.
Oh, Jim's sister.
Yeah.
Jim's sister. There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's
I
great.
gained a gem of a sister-in-law. She's amazing.
Absolutely.
Love her so much.
Elizabeth Lang says, thank you, Dawn, for the way you helped so many. Another friend of yours, I'm assuming.
Yeah, somebody I went to grade school with.
Grade school. Wow.
Yeah.
There. That's the conversation that you're talking about, where
Yep.
Elizabeth, if you have any thoughts, if you were able to catch any of the earlier parts of the show where Dawn was talking about how difficult it is to recall some earlier memories, if you have any thoughts on that, if you've had any conversations, feel free to share. Rose says, thank you for such an insightful and important show. And Jonathan says, thank you for a fascinating show as well. I want to give a quick programming note for folks. You might see the ticker on the bottom. We have another show coming up. Our next show is going to be March 13th. So for folks who may be new, we air this show twice a month, the second and fourth Thursdays of the month. These are such heavy topics. It helps to have that week in between. I don't know that we could do this as a weekly show, but we will be back March 13th. Our guest will be Pradnya Haldipur, a friend of mine here in the DC area. And I know this is something that's very important to her. She's going to talk about managing mental health while still being effective at work. And that's something we have talked about before in terms of mental health challenges at work. Dawn and I have both struggled with that, but Pradnya will offer some thoughts on that account. So we encourage you to join us Thursday, March 13th at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central for that show. That should be another interesting conversation as well. We are at the hour mark, and Dawn and I have been fierce about trying to keep this show to an hour. So I do want to make sure that before we close, we offer some of the resources that we give to folks so that you know where you can get some help. We talked about the EMDR Institute. If you want to reach out to them, please visit their website, emdr.com, or send them an email. They're very responsive, inst@emdr.com, inst@emdr.com. Certainly worth reaching out to. And we also want to make sure that you know about NAMI. NAMI is the National Alliance for Mental Illness. They can be reached at 1-800-950-6264 or NAMI.org. And they do a lot of great support groups, a lot of community groups. We've had several guests talk about them. And certainly encourage you to reach out if you are looking for that kind of support. We always share Mental Health America as well. The 988lifeline.org. 988lifeline.org. You can also reach their website, mhanational.org, mhanational.org. And finally, as we mentioned earlier, Dawn and I are both survivors of rape and abuse, respectively. So we share this stat from RAIN. Every 68 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted. RAIN is the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, and you can reach their sexual assault hotline at 1-800-656-HOPE, 1-800-656-HOPE, or their website, rainn.org. That's a lot of resources that we threw at you, but we wanted to make sure that folks are aware of it. And I've mentioned Dawn's book a few times in this show because I'm talking about how this the blog post that she shared was more heartbreaking than even the book. But we want to make sure that you know about The Blue Flower Curtain, Dawn's memoir that she wrote about her very violent attack and rape 30 years ago. Dawn, do you want to take a quick moment to talk about the book before we close?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just it's my memoir. It goes through the story of what happened to me. It's everyone that I've talked to says that it's a tough, good read. So the first half is hard to get through, but the second half is hopefully meant to be hopeful and inspiring. And please check it out. It's at you can get it through Amazon. Locally through different bookstores. You can check it out locally at the Oak Creek Library, the Racine Library, and the Hales Corners Library. So please check it out.
Absolutely. And you won't be disappointed. I read it over break in one sitting, primarily 20 pages when I had a moment, and then I read through the rest of it in just one sitting. It was just incredible. And I certainly encourage you to check it out. The Blue Flower Curtain is available on Amazon. I've shared the links in our Facebook pages for folks to read. One last comment from my mom. Thank you to Dawn and Neil for talking about painful incidents that we've both had. And I particularly want to thank Dawn for sharing this experience around accessing childhood memories and the use of EMDR to help. It's always inspiring to have you talk about your experiences, but to know that you're sharing this for the first time is even more so. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil, for making this suggestion that we do this show. I think it's been very therapeutic for me, and I appreciate the opportunity to share.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Hopefully, folks will be able to join us in a few weeks, and in future sessions. We are thinking about planning a panel discussion, bringing back a few former guests who shared their stories for the first time, and to see what that experience was like, and kind of how things have evolved since then. So keep an eye out. If you want to be added to our mailing list, feel free to email me, neil@digimentors.group, neil@digimentors.group, and I'll add you. It's a light list. We send out really one email for each show, sometimes two, depending on the timing. But I'll make sure you get all the links and all the information about Shining Light on Shadows, a candid conversation about mental health. Thank you. And Jonathan says that panel discussion would be a great anniversary show. Jonathan, that's a great idea. We actually are passing our anniversary, because I think it was the 1st of February, or the first couple weeks in February. But we are planning this for Mental Health Awareness Month. So I think hopefully that'll be a good time to have that conversation. I hope you'll be able to join us. Thank you, everyone, and good night. Hope you do well, and look forward to having you join us for our next episode. Bye-bye.